Welcome to our deep dive into the history of free speech.
Yeah?
We're going to be using Jacob Mchangama's book, Free Speech, a history from Socrates to social media as our guide. And it's going to be a really interesting journey as we go through time and sort of explore this idea, this essential yet often contested idea.
Right.
And we're going to be uncovering how different cultures from the ancient Greeks all the way to the printing press era kind of wrestled with the power of free expression.
So it's fascinating to think about this history, especially now.
Yeah.
Mchangama points out that globally we're in a free speech recession.
Oh, wow.
And fewer countries have a genuinely free press now than they did just a decade ago.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a stark contrast to what we might assume in our hyper-connected world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book highlights how even well-established democracies are grappling with disinformation and online hate speech. And sometimes their responses inadvertently create more problems.
So to understand these modern challenges, we're going to go all the way back to the roots of democracy in ancient Greece.
Sounds good. It's the ancient Athenians. They had isagoria, which was the right of all citizens to speak in the assembly.
Okay.
And that formed the bedrock of their political system.
Gotcha.
But what's truly intriguing is their concept of parrhesia.
Okay.
Uninhibited speech in all aspects of life.
So they could criticize their neighbors, even philosophical ideas openly.
Precisely.
Wow.
Imagine a society where you could even critique democracy itself.
That's incredible.
The very system granting you that freedom.
Yeah. That level of open discourse is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So what about the Romans?
Well, the Romans had libertas.
Libertas.
But it was more about the privileges of the elite than universal rights. The book gives this great example of the poet Naevius, who was exiled for criticizing Roman leaders.
Oh, wow.
And it just goes to show that these restrictions on free speech are not a modern invention.
Right. It seems like power and free speech have always had this complicated relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that takes us to early Christianity, a period that reshaped the very meaning of free speech.
So early Christians often faced persecution.
Right.
So their focus was more on religious freedom than open societal debate, right?
Yes, and it's reflected in how terms like ecclesia and parrhesia evolved.
Okay.
So ecclesia shifted from political assemblies to gatherings of believers.
Okay.
And parrhesia became about speaking directly to God. Now let's move on to the medieval period.
Okay.
This era, often dubbed the Dark Ages, it's often associated with the suppression of free thought.
Right. The church held immense power and actively sought to stamp out heresy. And that's when the first index of forbidden books appeared, right?
Yes, under Pope Gelasius II in 496.
Wow.
An early form of censorship.
Yeah.
But you know, it's important to remember that intellectual debate didn't entirely vanish.
Okay.
You know, Islamic scholars like Avicenna and Al-Ghazali flourished, pushing boundaries in philosophy and theology.
So even in times of restricted freedom, people found ways to explore ideas.
It shows the inherent human drive for intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And this drive was given a monumental boost with Gutenberg's invention of the printing press.
Right. It completely revolutionized the spread of knowledge.
Yes.
And played a huge role in the Reformation.
Imagine the impact of book prices dropping.
Wow.
To the cost of a loaf of bread.
Wow.
Luther's ideas spread like wildfire thanks to the printing press, which allowed people to read the Bible in their own language.
But wasn't the Reformation a double-edged sword for free speech?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
While Luther championed the freedom to interpret Scripture when others interpreted it differently, leading to movements like the peasant revolts.
Yeah.
He backtracked.
Oh, wow.
The book highlights how even someone who benefits from free expression can become wary of its consequences when it threatens their own power.
So advocating for free speech in principle is different from grappling with its implications in practice.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this tension has played out repeatedly throughout history.
Now let's talk about those often forgotten champions of religious tolerance in England, like Thomas Helwys and John Merton.
They were incredibly brave,
Yeah.
advocating for freedom of conscience in a time when such ideas could land you in prison or worse.
Wow.
Helwys even argued for freedom of conscience for everyone, including those considered heretics.
That's remarkable.
In his book.
Wow. That's a remarkably radical stance.
Oh, yeah.
For the early 17th century.
Definitely.
It seems like they paved the way for thinkers like John Milton.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Milton's Areopagitica
Yeah.
is a landmark text in the history of free speech.
Okay.
He argued vehemently against censorship, believing that truth emerges from the free exchange of ideas.
So it's the classic marketplace of ideas concept where the best ideas will win out in the end. If given the chance to compete freely.
Precisely.
And this idea resonated during the English Enlightenment, particularly in Cato's letters, which fiercely defended free speech as a safeguard against
a bulwark of liberty.
And Cato's letters were hugely influential, even across the Atlantic, shaping the views of colonial Americans, right? Yeah. It demonstrates how powerful ideas can transcend borders.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift our focus
to
the French Enlightenment, where the fight for free speech took a fascinating turn.
I know the philosophers challenged traditional authority and championed reason and individual liberty.
Right.
Were they also battling censorship?
Definitely. Diderot's Encyclopedia, a massive project to compile all human knowledge, faced fierce opposition from the church and the French government.
Because they saw it as a threat to their power?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But thanks to individuals like Malesherbes, the royal censor, who shielded the project. Wow. It was eventually published.
Wow, that's incredible.
And there's this fascinating correlation areas in France with the most encyclopedia subscribers. Ended up being the most prosperous a century later.
It shows how access to information
drives
progress.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it highlights this recurring theme. While free speech is often challenged, the human desire for knowledge and expression persists.
Now let's talk about enlightened absolutism. Were some monarchs influenced by these Enlightenment ideals?
Yes. Figures like Catherine the Great of Russia and Frederick the Great of Prussia embraced some Enlightenment principles, including promoting tolerance and open discussion, but always within limits.
So it was a balancing act
Yes.
between embracing new ideas and maintaining control.
And it shows that progress isn't always straightforward.
Yeah.
Speaking of progress, the book mentions that Scandinavia played a pioneering role in legally protecting free speech.
Really?
Indeed. Sweden and Denmark were the first countries to enshrine legal protections for free speech in the 18th century. A surprisingly early development.
Yeah.
Of course, they weren't without their flaws and setbacks.
Right.
But they were ahead of their time in recognizing free speech's importance in law.
Meanwhile, in America, the seeds of revolution were being sown.
Yes.
And free speech was right at the heart of the struggle.
Think back to Cato's letters, which were hugely popular in the colonies. Americans were already deeply protective of their right to free speech.
Right.
The Zenger trial in 1735, which established truth as a defense against libel, set a crucial legal precedent.
So even before the American Revolution, free speech was already a defining characteristic of American identity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was seen as fundamental to holding power accountable. And this commitment carried over into the founding of the nation.
Right into the Constitution.
But there were debates about the limits of free speech.
Oh, of course.
During the drafting of the Constitution, right?
The Federalists and Anti-Federalists argued fiercely about how free speech should be defined and protected in the new nation. These debates, in many ways, continue today as we grapple with the complexities of free speech in the modern world.
It seems like defining the boundaries of free speech has always been a challenge.
It has.
Yeah.
And as we'll see, the 19th and 20th centuries brought new challenges and intensified old debates as mass media emerged, social movements rose, and totalitarian regimes demonstrated the devastating consequences of suppressing free expression.
So that sets the stage for our next part, where we'll explore how technology, especially the internet and social media, has reshaped the landscape of free speech.
Whole new world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we move into the modern era, it feels like the relationship between free speech and technology is kind of at the forefront.
Oh, definitely.
Was there a sense that the internet would usher in a new era of free expression?
There was certainly a wave of optimism.
Okay.
The this This massive interconnected network seemed poised to break down barriers to communication and make censorship a thing of the past.
Okay.
People envisioned a world where information flowed freely and individuals could express themselves without constraint.
It was almost like a digital utopia for free speech. But as we've seen, things haven't quite turned out that way.
No.
What happened?
Well, as Michigama points out, we're actually experiencing a global free speech recession.
Oh, wow.
And the digital age, while offering new avenues for expression, has also brought new forms of control and suppression.
The book specifically mentions online censorship.
Right.
How has that played out?
Well, authoritarian regimes, for example, have become incredibly skilled at controlling online information.
Okay.
They use sophisticated tools like firewalls to block websites, surveillance technologies to monitor online activity, and even targeted campaigns to silence dissent.
So the internet, which was supposed to liberate information, has become a tool of repression in some cases.
It's a sobering reality.
Yeah.
And it's not just limited to authoritarian regimes.
Right.
Even democracies have implemented online censorship measures, often in the name of combating hate speech terrorism or disinformation.
But as we discussed earlier, those efforts can sometimes be counterproductive.
Exactly. They can stifle legitimate dissent and create a chilling effect on free expression.
Okay.
And they can even be used to target marginalized groups, further silencing those who are already vulnerable.
The book uses China as a prime example of this online censorship.
Yeah, China's Great Firewall is a stark illustration of how technology can be wielded to restrict access to information and control the narrative.
So they've created this heavily controlled digital environment. And what's concerning is that China's been exporting these censorship technologies to other authoritarian governments.
It's a troubling trend.
Yeah.
They're essentially sharing their playbook on how to restrict online speech.
Wow.
Making it harder for people around the world to access information and express themselves freely.
So this idea of the internet as a force for freedom is complicated.
It is.
It can be a tool for both liberation and repression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's important to remember that the internet is also a powerful tool for resistance.
Okay.
We've seen activists around the world use it to organize protests, to share information, and to challenge authoritarian regimes.
The Arab Spring, for instance, showed how the internet could facilitate social movements and amplify calls for political change.
Social media platforms in particular played a crucial role in disseminating information and mobilizing people.
But it's also important to note that technology alone doesn't guarantee success.
Of course not.
Right. The courage and determination of the individuals involved are paramount.
It's a reminder that free speech is ultimately about human agency.
Yeah.
About people using their voices to demand change.
Well said.
Okay.
Now let's delve into the world of social media, which has become such a dominant force in our lives.
Yes.
It's had a profound impact on how we communicate, share information, and engage in public discourse, and it's undeniably reshaped the landscape of free speech.
It really has.
Social media has given a voice to those who were previously unheard, allowing them to connect, share their experiences, and participate in conversations that were once limited to traditional media outlets.
It's created new spaces for dialogue and debate.
Yeah.
Fostering connections across geographical boundaries and amplifying marginalized voices.
But as Manjana argues, it's also created a whole new set of challenges for free speech.
It has.
The book mentions elite panic as one of these challenges.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
So elite panic describes the often overblown reaction of elites to perceived threats from social media.
Okay.
They might see social media as this chaotic and uncontrollable force that undermines their authority, spreads misinformation, and disrupts traditional hierarchies.
And this fear often leads them to call for greater regulation and censorship of online speech.
They view stricter control as necessary to maintain order and stability.
But as we've seen throughout history, these restrictions often backfire.
They do.
Right.
They stifle dissent, create echo chambers, and ultimately hinder progress.
The book cites Germany's NetzDG law as an example of this type of regulation.
The NetzDG law passed in 2017,
Okay.
aimed at combating hate speech and fake news online, has been criticized for being overly broad
Okay.
and giving social media companies excessive power to censor content.
So even with good intentions, these efforts to regulate online speech can have unintended consequences that actually harm free expression.
It highlights the delicate balance we need to strike.
Yeah.
And it raises questions about who gets to decide what constitutes hate speech or fake news and how those decisions are made.
The book also points out that the very structure of social media platforms poses challenges for free speech.
Social media platforms are designed to prioritize engagement and virality.
So content that is controversial,
exactly,
emotionally charged, outrageous, often spreads more quickly and widely, regardless of its accuracy or truthfulness.
And the algorithms that drive these platforms can end up amplifying harmful content, contributing to the spread of misinformation and polarization.
It's like a built-in bias towards the sensational.
It is.
Even if it's not accurate or productive.
Exactly.
And this creates echo chambers and filter bubbles where people are primarily exposed to information that confirms their existing biases. It makes it harder to engage in nuanced conversations, consider different perspectives, and find common ground.
And then on top of that, you have the increasing power of social media companies themselves to control what content is allowed on their platforms.
They've become the de facto arbiters of online speech.
They have.
With the ability to remove content, suspend accounts, and even ban users entirely.
And often these decisions are made without much transparency or accountability.
It raises concerns about bias, censorship, and the potential for these companies to silence viewpoints they disagree with, even if those viewpoints are perfectly legitimate.
It's a concentration of power that warrants scrutiny.
So social media has undeniably democratized access to information and given individuals a powerful platform to express themselves. But it's also created new avenues for control and censorship.
It's a double-edged sword.
It seems like this never-ending battle to find the right balance.
It is.
Now I want to talk about hate speech online.
Okay.
It's a serious issue with real-world consequences.
Absolutely.
How does the book address this challenge?
Hate speech is undeniably a problem, and it's one that's amplified online. The anonymity and reach of the internet make it easier for individuals to spread hateful messages without fear of consequences.
And as we've discussed, the algorithms that drive social media can inadvertently contribute to the spread of such content.
They can.
So we're dealing with both human behavior and the structure of the platforms themselves. It's a complex problem.
It is.
Finding solutions that effectively combat hate speech, while upholding free speech principles, is incredibly challenging.
It is.
Mashangama explores different approaches, including legal measures, platform regulations, and counter-speech initiatives. So instead of just trying to silence hateful voices, the focus is on countering them with facts, reason, and alternative perspectives.
It's about fostering a more inclusive and informed online environment where hate speech is less likely to take root. Education and media literacy are also key. We need to empower individuals to critically evaluate online information, identify hate speech, and understand its potential impact.
It sounds like a long-term project.
It is.
Changing online culture and promoting more responsible online behavior.
It is a long-term project.
But it's crucial if we want to create online spaces where people feel safe, respected, and empowered to express themselves freely without fear of harassment or abuse.
Absolutely.
Another major challenge the book explores is the rise of disinformation online. It's become a significant concern, especially in the context of elections and political campaigns. How does Mashangama approach this issue?
Well, he highlights the role of the internet in accelerating the spread of disinformation. It's incredibly easy to create and share false information online And social media platforms, with their focus on virality and engagement, can unwittingly contribute to its dissemination.
Yeah, it's a serious threat to informed decision-making.
It is.
And democratic process.
Absolutely.
So how do we address this problem without resorting to censorship and undermining free speech principles?
It's a delicate balancing act.
Okay.
Mchangama advocates for a multi-pronged approach.
Oh, okay.
One crucial element is media literacy.
Okay.
We need to equip individuals with the skills to critically evaluate online information, identify false or misleading content, and understand the tactics used to manipulate public opinion.
It's about empowering people.
It is.
To be more discerning consumers of information.
Exactly.
We also need to support independent journalism.
Yes.
And fact-checking initiatives.
Yes.
Which play a vital role in debunking false claims and providing reliable information.
And holding social media companies accountable for the spread of disinformation on their platforms is also important.
So it's about pressuring these companies to take more responsibility for the content that circulates on their platforms.
Exactly.
What specific steps can they take?
Well, they can implement measures to label or flag false content, promote authoritative sources, and remove harmful misinformation that could incite violence or endanger public safety.
Transparency in their content moderation policies is also crucial.
It is.
So users understand how decisions are made and can hold these companies accountable.
Right.
It seems like addressing disinformation requires a collective effort. Individuals being more discerning, journalists upholding ethical standards, and social media companies taking more responsibility for the content they host.
It's a shared responsibility.
And it's an ongoing challenge.
It is.
As those spreading disinformation constantly adapt their tactics.
Yeah, they did.
But as Mchangama emphasizes, protecting free speech doesn't mean giving a free pass to those who deliberately spread falsehoods, to manipulate and deceive.
We need to be vigilant.
It's about finding ways to foster a healthier information ecosystem where truth and accuracy can prevail.
Exactly.
Now, taking a broader perspective, what are the implications of this free speech recession that Mchangama describes? What are the consequences of eroding free expression, both online and offline?
That's a great question. That's what I want to discuss in our final part.
Okay.
We'll explore the ripple effects of this decline of free speech.
Okay.
And consider what we can learn from history to navigate the challenges ahead.
Sounds good. So we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into the history of free speech, from ancient Greece to the rise of social media. But as we wrap up, I'm left wondering about the consequences of this global free speech recession that Mchangama describes. What happens when free expression is eroded? What's at stake?
Well, the book emphasizes that free speech is often most vulnerable when we need it most. You know, during times of crisis or upheaval, there's this urge to restrict speech in the name of security or stability.
Right. It seems almost counterintuitive that when things are uncertain, we'd want to limit the free flow of information and ideas.
It's a natural human impulse, perhaps. But history shows us that these restrictions rarely achieve their intended goals. They often backfire, silencing dissent, fueling resentment, and ultimately undermining the very values they're meant to protect.
So what does history teach us about the consequences of suppressing free speech?
Well, think back to examples like the French Revolution or the American Civil War. These were tumultuous periods, and those in power often sought to quell dissent through censorship and crackdowns. But these measures only served to exacerbate tensions and deepen divisions. They prevented the open exchange of ideas that could have led to more peaceful resolutions.
It seems like restricting speech only makes the underlying problems worse.
Exactly. It creates an environment where resentment festers, grievances go unheard, and alternative solutions are stifled.
On an individual level, what are the implications of living in a society where free speech is constrained?
It's about more than just being able to voice your opinions without fear of punishment. It's about having the freedom to think for yourself, to question authority, to challenge the status quo when free speech is suppressed. It limits our ability to grow intellectually, to explore new ideas, and to contribute to the progress of society.
It's almost like free speech is essential for individual flourishing.
Precisely, the freedom to express ourselves is intricately linked to our sense of self-worth, our ability to form relationships, and our capacity for creativity and innovation. When we're silenced, We're not only deprived of our voice, but also of a fundamental aspect of our humanity.
And this connects back to Mkangama's argument that free speech is not a luxury, but a necessity.
It's essential for holding power to account, exposing corruption, and ensuring that governments serve the interests of the people. Without free speech, societies become stagnant, vulnerable to abuse, and ultimately less free.
Now, the book doesn't shy away from acknowledging the harms that can be caused by free speech. We've discussed issues like hate speech, disinformation, and the potential for online abuse. How do we reconcile these real concerns with the need to protect free expression?
It's a constant balancing act. We have to acknowledge that free speech is not absolute. There are limits, and those limits are often defined by the potential for harm.
So where do we draw the line?
It's a complex question that has been debated for centuries. But I think a key principle is that restrictions on speech should be narrowly tailored to address specific and demonstrable harms. We shouldn't resort to censorship simply because we find certain ideas offensive or uncomfortable.
So the focus should be on mitigating the harms while preserving the fundamental right to free expression.
Exactly. And this requires a multifaceted approach. We need to educate people about the importance of responsible speech, promote media literacy, and develop effective mechanisms for addressing online abuse and harassment. But we should be wary of solutions that could stifle legitimate dissent or give too much power to those who would seek to control the flow of information.
One of the things that struck me about the book is that it doesn't offer easy answers. It presents a nuanced and complex view of the history of free speech, highlighting both its triumphs and its failures.
And I think that's crucial. There's a tendency to oversimplify these debates, to see free speech as either an absolute good or an absolute evil. But the reality is far more complicated.
It's a powerful tool that can be used for both good and ill.
Exactly. It all depends on how we use it, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to engage in open and honest debate about the challenges and opportunities presented by free speech in the digital age.
The book ends on a note of cautious optimism, doesn't it?
Yes. Despite the current free speech recession, Mchanga sees reasons for hope. He points to the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring power of ideas, and the potential for technology to be used to empower individuals and promote free expression.
It's a reminder that the fight for free speech is ongoing, and its outcome is far from certain. We're all participants in this story, shaping its future with our words and actions.
That's a powerful way to put it. This deep dive into the history of free speech has shown us that it's a constantly evolving concept, a battleground of ideas that has been fought over for centuries, and as we navigate the challenges of the digital age, it's crucial to remember the lessons of the past and to approach these debates with nuanced humility and a deep commitment to preserving this fundamental human right.
What stands out to you most from our exploration of free speech? What insights will you carry with you as you continue to engage with this complex, essential idea?
For me, it's the realization that free speech is not just a legal or political concept, but a deeply human one. It's about our ability to connect with others, to express ourselves authentically, and to participate in the shaping of our world. It's a right worth cherishing and a responsibility worth upholding.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of free speech. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring this fascinating and ever-evolving topic. Until next time, keep those minds open, those voices strong, and remember, the best and strangest idea is still worth fighting for.